Hi, everybody. Welcome to Story Station. I'm so glad you joined us. Today we have a great book about writing a story. Have you ever thought about writing a story? Well, it might be easier than you think. So let's get our bodies ready. Get your circles on your eyes and open them really, really wide because this story is going to have some amazing ideas and you'll want to see them. Put your C's behind your ears and turn up the volume so you can hear all the interesting ideas that you can get from right around where you look. And last but not least, get your fingers at your throat and open up that voice box so you can yell out some answers when I ask you questions. I love to respond when people ask me questions. I bet you do too. And now let's get ready to sing the parts of the book. The title's on the front, the title's on the front. Hi-ho, Biblio, the title's on the front. The author writes the words, the author writes the words. Hi-ho, Biblio, the author writes the words. The illustrator draws, the illustrator draws. Hi-ho, Biblio, the illustrator draws. The spine binds the book, the spine binds the book. Hi-ho, Biblio, the spine binds the book. And now it's time to read, and now it's time to read. Hi-ho, Biblio, and now it's time to read. So, our story today is called Rocket Writes a Story by Tad Hills. Who do you think Rocket is? Can you tell? I think I've read another book about Rocket. Rocket learns to read. Now he's writing a story. I think Rocket is this great big white dog. Is that what you said? And who is this down here? That looks like a little yellow friend. Can you tell what it is? He flies. You're right. If you said bird, Rocket writes a story. Wow! Look at all these pictures and all these words. Do you think that's giving him an idea? What would your story be if you wrote a story? Would you pick one of these things? Box, pumpkin, rabbit, grapes, dog, corn, pan, owl, carrot. What would you write? What do you think Rocket's going to write about? It looks like he's very busy writing right here. Rocket Writes a Story by Tad Hills. And thank you to Schwartz Wade Books and Penguin Random House for allowing us to share this book with you. Rocket loved books, and he loved to read. He loved to read them to himself or sit quietly by his teacher, the little yellow bird, as she read them aloud. Rocket even liked the way books smelled. When he opened a new book, it smelled like a place he'd never been to, like a friend he'd never met. The little yellow bird agreed. Books are inspiring. They make me sing. Do you have some favorite books that make you feel like singing? Rocket loved words too, and after snack time, his teacher would say, "Rocket, why don't you use that nose of yours to sniff out some new words?" And he'd go off, he'd fetch some nice ones like Buttercup. It's that little tiny flower. What color is it? Can you tell? I bet you said yellow. And bugs and feathers, one that landed on his nose. and nest way up there. I'm looking for words, Rocket would announce to anyone who would listen. Rocket always brought his words back to the classroom and wrote them down. The little yellow bird would help him spell the tricky ones, and then they'd hang them on their word tree. Sometimes the bird added her own words to the collection. "This one is small, but I promise it will come in handy," she said. Can you tell what that word is? U-P. The U, there's just one vowel, it's short, it goes and the P sound is P. And when you put those together, it's up, up. It is a short word. Do you ever look up in the sky? "Magnificent," chirped the little yellow bird once their tree was covered with words. "Now what shall we do with all these splendid words?" Rocket thought all afternoon, and then he had an idea. "Wow, I see over, grass, hill, log, pencil, dog, egg, nest, stick, leaf, bush, down, under, bug, rock, book, ant." So many words. Have you heard of some of those words? Rocket left school that day with a very waggy tail. "I am going to write a story," he declared to Fred and Emma. "My story will be an adventure about the great wide world," he told a butterfly. "I will use many words," he explained to Mr. Barker. Oh, I wonder why they called him Mr. Barker. What do dogs do a lot of? It's in the word barker. You're right. They bark. "Hello up there," he called as he passed the tree where he had found the word nest. "I am going to write a story." The next day, Rocket returned to the classroom. It was time to begin. He looked down at the blank page, and the blank page looked up at him. But no story would come. He's got his pencil all ready. He's got his paper all ready. What do you think the problem is? Well, at snack time, Rocket gave up. "I don't know what to write," he told his teacher. And she's looking at that blank page too. Why do you think he's having so many problems writing a story? He knew all those words. "Don't worry," the little yellow bird replied. "One of the hardest parts of writing is coming up with a good story. But it's one of the most fun, too. Perhaps you want to write about something you've seen." "A bug?" asked Rocket. "Yes," sang the teacher. "Stories need good characters. Or what about something that happened to you? Or something you really enjoy?" "My favorite stick," suggested Rocket. "Of course," said the bird. "Or you could write about something that inspires you." "Inspires me?" asked Rocket. "Yes, something that excites you," the little bird sang. I'm wondering if any of these words are going to excite him and give him an idea. Snail, feather, hill, rock, bee, tail, book. Think anything there excites him? Rocket took a walk and looked for inspiration. He thought about the friends he knew and the places he'd been. He'd stuck his nose high in the air and sniffed the gentle breeze. And there it was, a delightful smell of pine needles and feathers. Inspiration. For the rest of the morning, he thought about feathers and pine needles and feathers. And that afternoon, started to write. In the evening, Rocket followed the beautiful smell until he found himself at the tree with the nest. "Hello again," he called into the branches. "Is anyone home?" He heard a rustling from above, but no one answered. "I'm sorry to disturb you, but I must tell you that you smell very nice, very inspiring. May I ask you who you are?" Still nothing. "Perhaps I'll come back at a more convenient time," he said, and trotted off. Wonder who was up there. Who do you think he was talking to? Somebody in the nest. That night, as Rocket watched the stars, thought about feathers and a nest in a pine tree, he thought about his story and his collection of words. Are you thinking of something that Rocket could write about? On his way to school the next day, Rocket was surprised by what he saw. "A brand new word," he said, "and it's already written down. It says O-W-L. Something that's in that pine tree. Can you guess what it is?" "Owl!" came a quiet voice from the branches. "It says owl." "Thank you," cried Rocket. "I'm always looking for words, and this one's a beauty." Rocket ran all the way to his classroom. O-W-L, owl. "Now there's a word you don't hear every day," chirped the little yellow bird. "Only 3 letters, but what a word!" "It was a present," explained Rocket, and he added the new word to his story. "I am writing a story about you," Rocket announced proudly to the owl the next morning. The owl poked her head out of her nest, and for the first time Rocket saw her friendly face. Her big round eyes blinked below feathery tufts. "About me?" she asked. "Would you like to come down and hear it?" asked Rocket. "Thank you, but I think I'll listen from my nest," the owl answered. So Rocket cleared his throat and began to read. Once there was an owl. She smelled like feathers and pine needles. She lived in a tree. The owl's eyes widened. "Is there more?" "There will be," said Rocket. Each day, Rocket worked on his story. He wrote words down and crossed words out. And when things were going well, he wagged his tail. When he didn't know what to write, he growled. And sometimes he drew pictures for his story or took a walk in the meadow to look for inspiration. The little yellow bird encouraged him. "Remember, stories take time," she said. She wanted to know more about the owl and asked Rocket questions. "Why do you think owl wouldn't come down? What's your idea? What color is her beak? What does she do every day?" Do you think Rocket will put those ideas in his story? Rocket wanted to know more about the owl too. He visited her tree often and read her his story, which changed every day. The owl was captivated. And when Rocket stopped, she would always ask, "Then what happened?" At last the day came when Rocket knew he was finished. "What a fine story," chirped the little yellow bird after she read it. Rocket ran to the owl's pine tree. "It's done," he called. "Come listen." And so down and down came the owl till she was right beside Rocket. And then Rocket began to read. He read aloud about an owl with friendly eyes and a beak the color of a buttercup. She lived in a nest high in a tree on the edge of a meadow and smelled like pine needles and feathers. She liked to nap in the daytime and listen to stories. Branch by branch, the owl came down from her nest. Rocket read. She was shy, but she was brave too. Suddenly, Rocket stopped. He wrote something on his paper and then began to read again. One day, the owl came all the way to the ground and became my friend. The owl blinked. "Can there be one last sentence?" she asked. "Can you say, 'And the owl liked the story very much'?" "What a perfect ending," said Rocket. And it was. Wow! What a great story. Did it take Rocket just a short time or a long time to write this story? What do you think? I think it took him many, many days. And did you know the author and illustrator Tad Hills took many, many days to write this story too? So if you get an idea of a story, write down just your idea or draw a picture or tell one of your friends. It might not be finished when you first think of it. You might think of many more things to add, and it might take many days. Do you know that authors and illustrators sometimes take months and years to write a book? So don't be discouraged and keep your inspiration going. I can't wait to read our next book on Story Station next time. Thank you for joining me, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.